is frozen. I feel like since your internet got better, JP, everybody else we have to have at least one person who has internet that freezes them when they're about to say things.
Yeah, I had to come to the office. I gave up on my home internet connection for these things. All right. So got some participants coming in here. We're live now on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. And yeah.
If you're on Facebook, we encourage you to come into the room and join us on Zoom. Like, we know that you have opinions and thoughts and things, and we encourage you to join us on Zoom so that you can possibly say them and have us be able to respond to them a little bit more quickly than on the Facebook Live. So
yeah, we will try to keep an eye on the Facebook stream, on the comment section, see if we can pull any comments in. But yeah, come in and join us. All right.
Do you want to get started and people will join as we go? All right. So thank you all for coming. Welcome. My name is Nakia, and this is JP. JP is a part of Austin Justice Coalition. Thank y'all for being able to host this and have this conversation on Wednesdays. This is part of a series on trauma and policing. That's part of the reimagining policing discussion, and talking about like what can we do better? Like how can we reimagine public safety without policing? What does abolishing police look like? And what are the things that we need to kind of grapple with in order to get there? So this is the second to last one in this series, and it's been some really, really amazing discussions so far. We appreciate being able to have these two excellent folks on, and we're gonna ask y'all to introduce yourselves and let us know who you are and kind of what your experiences are and the lenses that you're coming from. Joe, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. My name is Joe. I am, by day, I work with a sexual health organization. At night, I consider myself an artist and a storyteller. And the work that I'm currently doing is revolving around reviewing the APD training videos and working with them on that, which is a challenge at times and trying, and I no longer enjoy Mondays, but really it's impactful work to the community. And aside from that, I think just living life at the intersections of my Black identity and being queer, I have come to have different experiences than a lot of people with not only APD, but other police departments that have adversely impacted me going forward in the future. So that's who I am, and that's kind of the work that I do in the city.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. MsAmazingHead, can you tell us about who you are and what your lens is on the intersection, or what are the experiences that you're bringing to the table today? Oh, you're on mute. Oh, you're still on mute.
Oh, can you guys hear me now? That's much better. Hi, okay, thank you guys for adding me on to this panel. My name is MsAmazingHead, the HBIC. I am original Austinite. I'm born and raised here in Austin, Texas. I am the self-proclaimed Queen of ATX. I'm with, I started my own organization, it's Austin Queer Cultural Center. I noticed that it was a big impact here in Austin that's needed for the queer community once I moved back here home in Austin 2 years ago from Los Angeles. With my organization, we were like just starting off. It's a nonprofit organization, so I'm really starting that off from the ground. I would like to bring certain things that we need in the queer community, such as in Austin, as in job readiness, shelter, food, programs, GED, for the queer community, and as well trying to start new jobs here in the city for us, by us. I just wanted to come in and bring my forte on everything with like policing and how everything is being ran in the community right now. Since I am new back to Austin, it's crazy for me to say that I'm from Austin, but a lot of Austin has changed for the good. So yeah, that's what basically I'm with today, is here to fill in with you guys and how you guys feel and see where you guys are coming from. And so therefore I see what I can put in and join with the guys, with you all and your all organizations and stuff like that, to make this a much better city for us all. But I'm all ears, so.
Great, thank you. And MsAmazingHead, I don't want to make assumptions since this is the first time that we've met. Can you let me know what pronouns that you use?
All of them. Them, they, she, he. I'm a representation of for all. I like to view myself as.
Thank you, thank
That's
you.
great.
I just realized that we forgot to introduce ourselves. JP, you want to go?
Sure. And so I'm Joao Paulo. Everyone in the community knows me as JP. I work with the Austin Justice Coalition, and I have to say I really look forward to these conversations on Wednesdays that we've been having. These are some of my favorite conversations, and just the spaces, what I've been able to learn from participating in these dialogues around policing in schools, policing in community, and this conversation too. I just really look forward to, really more than anything, to hearing and seeing where this is going to go. I am it's just funny. It's like I'm working on being an abolitionist. It's a constant work in progress. I don't have I don't have that nailed down yet, but I really do believe, and I'm motivated in doing this work in moving towards a world without policing and without prisons. And I think we have a lot of work to do to imagine what safety can look like in such a world. So I'm excited to have another edition of this conversation.
My name is Nakia Winfield. I do anti-racist consulting, and I look at power dynamics and social systems, often trying to get police accountability in places where police accountability doesn't exist, so everywhere. I was on the video review panel with Joe. I recently stepped back because I wanted to be able to enjoy Mondays. I don't know how many Mondays, like we are in a pandemic. Who knows what's going to happen? Rolled of anybody to think that we don't have a world or a country next year. So I want to be able to enjoy the parts of my life as much as possible. So I did step back from that, but I do have a lot of experience with looking at systemic issues within the police department around equity and advocacy. So I want to bring that to the table. I am also a queer woman who went around wearing a thobe today. My thobe was pretty great, just FYI. Thobes are dope, and have some feelings about that. But I also just want to bring in, because I feel like this is an introduction, but this is also a check-in. Right now I'm pretty fucked up because like it is so apparent that like we are really ready to like let cities burn versus like, I don't know, having any cops have any sort of like responsibility or accountability to people that they murder. And that's real fucked up with Breonna Taylor right now, and how they're charging them for bullets that went into other apartments, like just really screaming out loud that like we are never gonna actually have any accountability for this. So feeling some kind of way about that. And then here in Austin, I don't know if people saw it, I'm actually going to put the link to this. The Intercept did a really good article on a couple of weeks ago. No, I think it was over a month ago at this point. It's been a long 8 years since February, so time is a construct. I don't know what time means anymore. But right after that man shot Garrett Foster to death, there was an incident on like South First where there was a car that was on a bridge, and like all these cops came through, and they had like little remote control bomb dudes, and they had like a drone and like all sorts of things. And it was just this woman who was freaked out because there was a cop that was behind her, and she had just been at that protest the night before watching like cops not actually go after the man that killed Garrett Foster. And so she freaked out. And so instead of pulling over, she just stopped in the middle of the road, and she had her dog, and she just had her hands up like this and was terrified to move. And they couldn't hear her, and she couldn't hear them. And like luckily she's physically okay, but it just escalated so quickly. And it shows so much about like how we're not really interested in like actually protecting and serving people. Like this is just an opportunity for like these guys to bring toys out and to ramp some things up when it's literally just a woman and her dog. So those are the things that I'm feeling, and those are coming into the room with me. But I just want to say we're going to have a real like casual conversation. So the idea is just that we're going to talk about what are the things that make up our framework when we think of the intersections of queerness and police interactions and trauma, because there's a lot with that all on its own, plus the fact that we've got like all people of color on here right now, and that intersection absolutely comes in too. So just kind of let's start with just what makes up the pieces of those things when you're thinking about queer identity and police interactions. And then we'll just go from there, just have this nice casual conversation. MsAmazingHead, you want to start?
Yes, I guess I'll just give you guys a briefing of what my history with Austin Police Department. What I would like to see change, and especially in the city of Austin. Since I've been back home for the last 2 years, I've been like learning myself all over again. So I live my life as male and female, so non-binary. I'm trans non-binary. I find it that when I drive my car as a Black male, I get pulled over. My last time I was in February, I got pulled over and they towed my car and took me to jail for 24 hours. And it was just for a traffic ticket violation. And I was just like, you guys, I was a block away from my house. I was like actually going to the corner store because I had no one to go get me some medication I needed because I ended up hurting myself at work. So they ended up like following me from a gas station a block away from my house, pulled me over, took me to jail, towed my car. So I've kind of been without a car since then. I was able to buy a new car. But, and I learned that when I dressed up as a female, when I present the world as her, cops don't pull me over. And, very few, when I got pulled over when I was dressed as he, they pat me down 3 times, and they're not like the rookie officers are saying like, oh, here in your charge to say that you're trans. I'm like, yeah, why are you keep rubbing on me 3 times? So those are like things that I see that need to be fit and change in the Austin Police Department. So, this is just one of the stories, but I truly believe that if they can like work on that, and we can work on that, because this is like ongoing. Like if I want to go to the grocery store, I have to put a wig on. Basically, I'm just speaking my truth of how I'm living life now in Austin with the police department. It's crazy. It's crazy. And in the sense of, I do live in an urban community, and I am like the only person I see in my community, in this community here in Austin. So sometimes that is a target. And I realize I'm stuck in between 2 worlds, but which both worlds are similar. Like as him, I have the target by the police department, by people. I've been in stores, sometimes people call the cops on me. It's just like, are you serious? Restaurants for misgendering me. And I realized when I step out as her, I have a target on my back in my own community. So it's just like, whoa. So how can I go about working around this? Because I have to live. And sometimes I feel like I can't breathe. So I was just wanted to share some of my stories, and the list goes on and on. Like I said, I'm from here in Austin. I'm from here. from here, from the city of Austin, and like now the year of 2020, how I have seen all these organizations are coming together against this police department. I'm so proud of, like, finally, finally some justice is served, and on my behalf as an Austinite, a Black male, a Black trans woman, I have been labeled really, 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 really bad with the Austin Police Department. The stories I have to tell, you wouldn't believe it. Stop it, Pasha. But yeah, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of that. I don't want to get off topic here.
Thank you.
I think my experiences with police in general happened at a very early age. I just remember seeing like my brother, uncles, and like my stepdad and their interactions, and me not understanding like what was going on. And then it wasn't until I came into like my own queer identity and saw like how the interaction kind of work at the same time. And so I identify as Black, gay, but I also recognize that I'm more effeminate, more femme than a lot of, I guess, guys. And I recognize the world sees me as a Black man, but one of the things that I've realized is when I am in need of some assistance, and that's when like the queer identity or the fact that I'm more effeminate comes at play. And so I just remember there have been multiple attacks against me, physical and verbal, and I have not been able to trust that the police will actually have my best interests in resolving some of these issues. And I feel like it's a constant like fight to hear what I'm saying, and to see me and to see that trauma. And I'm not the only person that has to go through that, And so I've been on 6th Street and I've seen officers kind of see what happened and excuses happen on behalf of other people. I've been physically assaulted and called the police. And instead of, trying to go find the person that had just walked away and attacked me, they were arguing with who would file the police report. At UT, I talked about an encounter I had, and the police department essentially told me that I was lying, and they didn't believe my story. And so as someone who's in the world and whose harm is at the expense of other people daily, how do you trust an institution that essentially has called you a liar? And how do you trust an institution on the other side that is a constant threat against you? And so I have to walk a fine line of, to be honest, my perpetrators have all been within my community, have all been Black men. And so how do I call the police on Black men when I know what will happen with them, against them? But on the flip side, I know what won't happen. I know what, and so there really isn't a place other than the community that I can go to even feel some sort of reconciliation, because no one other than people that experience these intersections will really understand the depths of what will happen and understand how like no one really has the ability to connect with you or to connect to that story unless they've lived through that experience. And so it's really hard it's a really hard circle to kind of be in, where the brutality of the police, but you also know the brutality of your lived experiences.
Ooh, thank you. I think that when just watching you tell that, I feel like it's really important for us to mention that like we're talking about trauma, right? Like this is the trauma and policing series, and remembering and reliving and retelling trauma is also traumatic a lot of times. And so both for our panelists and for our participants, like please do whatever it is that you need to do to be able to be safe during this time, right? Like if you need to turn your camera off, if you need to step away, if you need to, whatever it is that you need to do, drink some water, like it is so important for us to care for ourselves, and to be able to be held in these spaces. So like, I'm not saying that anybody needs to do anything right now, but just like, please know that like, if you needed to handle your things however you want to handle them, like this is a space for you to do that, right? Part of liberation and imagining imagining public safety is to be able to figure out how we're bringing our whole selves to the table, and like asking for what we need or doing what we need for ourselves without having to ask for permission for anybody else, and prioritizing our own humanity and that of others. And that includes being able to figure out how we need to process our trauma. And the other thing about trauma that comes up when talking to you is always this reminder of like, there's the trauma of the initial incident, right? But then there's like the continued trauma of community response. There's continued trauma of like systemic response, and that complexity of like, okay, so my only way of being able to get justice after this like assault after this dehumanizing experience that I have had is like, the only option to me is a system that I know like kills people that look like me on a daily, right? Or assaults people who look like me on a daily. And like, how are we bringing in people during our most vulnerable times who are just set to re-traumatize us, right? And who often just make the situation worse and make it really clear to everybody else that like, if this in fact happens again, that again, like nothing will be done. And like, what does that do to the way in which we are just able to even interact in our own communities and society without police? Whew. Some of the things that come up for me around this is, and as a queer woman, like I am Black first and foremost. Like I feel like my queerness is not as visible, despite the fact that I got the shaved heads and like apparently I wear lesbian pants and spot boots. I'm wearing a thobe. Like that's people seem to like kind of skip over that. But also the other part is that I often frequent places that are middle to upper class. And that class difference around Black queerness is huge. And I remember like I can go around to most places and my queerness isn't a thing. Like again, my Blackness is like, oh, hello, are you here? Like, well, all right, are you? We like Black people, all right, you know, like you're, as long as you come one at a time, whatever. But like my queerness is something that can be overlooked and doesn't usually stop me, or isn't usually a large factor in my interactions with people. But that's in places like 34th Street, 38th Street, between Guad and Lamar, right? Like that's in like these areas where people are white and wealthy, and like they've set the bar for their queerness, right? Because they're queer and white and wealthy, and so that queerness part isn't going to come in. But if I go over to Capitol Plaza, just across I-35, and I go to one of the stores where they're selling things, I remember I was really taken aback, and I shouldn't have been. I was at some store. They were selling these really cheap shirts. They were really cute. And as I'm checking out to leave, there is a Black trans woman who is also checking out, and the clerks are just giving her a really shit time. And I wasn't really sure what to do, but I was like, okay, this is not a thing. I think she was $5 short, or maybe she was $15 short. I don't know what it was. But the clerks were just being real shitty about it. So I was like, girl, whatever. Here's $15. Like, that's fine. But they got into it with her by misgendering her. They called her it, and just like all sorts of shit went down. And they called the cops. And I was like, I'm not leaving. But like, it's also a thing where like this isn't supposed to be a story about me, but like, there were so many people who were there who were watching this and witnessing it and not stepping in. And it was really clear to me that like normally the power dynamics are like, oh, like I'm the customer, like you're the service person, you're the staff person, and I'm almost always on the side of like the person giving service because they ain't been getting paid for shit, right? Like they're clearly the lower person in the power dynamic. And it was totally flipped it was like, okay, I'm gonna dehumanize this person on the other side of the register, despite the fact that like they're supposed to be like the customer is always right or any of that shit. And then the people who are around them were also like either not engaging, not paying attention, or I remember I had gone out to my car to put my stuff away so I could come back and just wait with her. As I was coming back in, this older woman, like she was like a grandmother, and she turned to her little girl. She's like, I've never seen one of those before. And it was just this interaction that was just so ugly. And I feel like it's so important to be able to pull in that class piece, because if you're somebody who's living in like upper to middle class wealthy areas, it's just a very different experience, even if like police are involved on so many different levels. So I just wanted to say those things.
And I want
No, I have been.
Oh, sorry, MsAmazingHead. I was just gonna say, I think, you know, to add layers to this, I want to say the maybe not the presence of police, but some type of authority figure. Because when we go to Rain, OCH, Highland, the gay clubs or the queer clubs, bars in Austin, you know, they're not looking at you know, white people with you know, their eyebrow raised. It's us, it's queer people of color, Black people. I remember this guy threw a drink at my friends, and we were like, "What the fuck?" Sorry if I can't curse. But
Seems allowed.
the bouncer or security guy was about to throw us out because of our reaction to this white person throwing a drink at my friend. And it was just by the happenstance that we knew a bouncer there who was like, no, they didn't start this. It was this guy. And they kicked him out, but only because someone who was on their level, I guess, was able to vouch for us and be like, they didn't start it. You know, if we go even back further to Kiss and Fly, you know, the hip hop nights, there was a heavier security presence when we would go to Kiss and Fly on Thursday nights, just because they was playing hip hop music at the gay clubs. You know, it's not just police, but it's these like security guards or security officers, or the presence of something that's kin to police in queer spaces that also cause an issue. And I still, for the life of me, do not understand why, even at like the Austin Pride Parade, when we've tried to talk to them about the presence of police and the fact that they're in the parade with a tank passing out beads and stuff, not realizing like the messaging that's sending people. They're like number 3 in the parade, and they have a tank. What does that say to people, especially when we know the historical context of the queer movement? And that's the issue I have with specifically Austin, is because there are people who will say, oh, Black Lives Matter, all Black Lives Matter, but when they're in positions to actually implement changes to these spaces that are supposed to make Black queer people feel safe, they just go with the status quo. And it's, oh, well, you're just being too much, too sensitive. Oh, well, we have to have a police here. Oh, all of these things. And it's just frustrating.
Yeah, I feel like there's queer bomb, and then there's pride, right? And queer bomb, we do not have cops at queer bomb because I feel like it's much closer to the roots of the actual riot that it started with, and just the idea that we have skewed history so much, and I'm wondering how much of that is like literally just whitewashing history. Like now that we have our idea of like a queer person is a white guy, right? And that's what queer people are supposed to look like. That's what gayness is supposed to look like. Now that has to be in opposition to Blackness and like on the side of police, right? And the idea that there is a police float in Pride, and about how the conversation around what the problem with that is falling on the ear of the people who are just not interested in that, right? Like there's a way in which it has become corporatized, and that is also aligning with police as well.
Miss Amazing Head, were you going to say something a little earlier?
Oh, on her story, she was saying the young transgender girl being called the police on. That has been me in so many situations. And on the outside looking in, it makes me look like, oh, I'm ghetto, I'm this. But majority of the time, you know, I'm known for speaking up for myself and for pronouns and just making sure things are right in the community with businesses. So I have been banned from a lot of businesses, but I'm glad that, you know, someone else could see what was going on, has been going on. And to Joe's, with the Kiss and Fly night with the heavy security and stuff there, yeah, it's just, you know, we have to work, especially when I mean like how we put our money in and what we put our money into and what businesses. So if I'm gonna go to an establishment that doesn't like really genuinely serve my kind and my purpose, and then when I'm there, you make me feel uncomfortable, I'm not gonna put myself in that situation. And it's sad to say that it comes from a queer club, a gay club, you know? So especially to the Black.
You froze. We don't know where you went. Were you complete? You froze, and then we didn't hear what you had to say, and now you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, how long was I on mute?
Okay. And then you came back. So like not very long.
Yeah, your last part was essentially saying like it sucks that it's coming from like a queer establishment.
Yes. So we have to get in with those establishments and stuff and work with them. Or if not, I don't know what else to do. I've been doing this I feel like for so long by myself. So, but if you see someone that's in like a struggle by themselves that is queer, speak up for them. You know, I have been threatened, like, oh, I'm gonna call the police. And I'm like, are you really gonna call the police on me right now with all the things that's going on in America? You're gonna call the police on a Black queer person? Seriously. So the police comes, they're like, what's the problem? Well, they misgendered me and they got upset and they called the police on me. So now I'm banned from coming from this establishment because I was mispronounced. Is what I present in front of you is what I go by. I think that it's a way of how I can educate more people. Because if I look like a guy, call me him. But if I'm dressed as her and I sound like a him, don't call me sir. I'm going to correct you. My voice is my voice. My identity can change. I can't change my voice. So, but doing a little pioneer work with that is a must here in Austin. I feel like we don't have, besides the club, besides the nightlife and the club scene, we don't really have a community here. Once I moved back home, there was there's these organizations that's out here, but there's not like any organizations that caters to the older queer. You know, it's like we're being pushed out. I'm heading to my mid-30s, and so there was not like a lot of organizations out there that cater to me. So I took it upon myself to create that here in Austin because I know I'm not the only person that's feeling that way, that need, you know, the guidance to help. And sometimes with the police department, I've had so many lawsuits against the Austin Police Department. I never followed suit on. I didn't know how. I didn't know who to talk to. Back to Joe say, like the police station would say you're lying. You know, I didn't have a group of people behind me to fight against them. And now that we are feeling this is wonderful. So therefore the future can be better than the past here in the great city of Austin, Texas. And I just hopped from 3 different places. I'm sorry.
I hope so. You know, it's interesting. The story that you were sharing really makes me, you know, about the way when people are uncomfortable or you sort of raise a complaint, or you're in a space and you're talking loud, or you're calling someone out, and then they kind of immediately have this reaction of, well, let me call the police. And that makes me think of so much of what's happening in Austin right now in our post defund the police budget conversation. And there really is this sense that, like, oh my God, what will I do? You know, particularly in these like white establishments in downtown and stuff like that. And just this idea that it's almost like there's almost this like direct continuum from, you know, this, the body of an uncomfortable white person to a phone to a police officer, you know, it's just this like, and, you know, so I just wanted to highlight that, and that really makes me think of the way the relationship between policing and normativity in general, right? The police is here to sort of reinforce the norm. So anything that sort of deviates, that's when you have to have some kind of police or authority figure. And to what Joe said, something that really that highlights for me is the way in which the heteronormative experience of masculinity for me is an experience that I associate very much with almost like muscular tension, you know, like direct muscular tension in your body and your shoulders, where you just feel like you have to, like, you know, toughen up, or, you know, like, and how much that connects to the idea of the police officer, the figure of authority, this, you know, this male that I will call in to establish order, you know, and restore the norm. So yeah, I just wanted to, those are some of the things that have been coming into my mind as we have this conversation.
You know, as you say that, and I feel like, Nakia, I really miss you on that panel because you bring this up a lot. And you just brought it up, actually, the idea of trauma. And when we're talking about trauma, you know, when I tell my story, that is me kind of making a decision and a choice and owning that and having the ability to control my own narrative and control my story and be able to know, like, I can process this. What happens when I see police is I'm taken out of that ability. And when I see police officers, sometimes, most of the time, I have a physical reaction. I have a physical reaction to this. I get tense. I am nervous. I do not know what's going to happen. And if we engage in any way, I really don't know what's going to happen. And I am no longer able to, and I don't want to say control, but I'm taken out of my element. And I feel like my body is no longer mine. And the way to process that is sometimes you can't. And so if you are in a situation to where every day this is your lived experience and you are not able to decompress and process and think about it, think about all of these things that are just building into your body, and then you physically feel it. And so when we're talking about policing and trauma, we also have to talk about health and how this is like physically deteriorating our bodies. You know, when we're talking about stress, we still don't know what all stress can do to the body. And we see it manifest in high blood pressure, stroke, heart disease, cardiovascular disease, and all of these other physical ailments. But what we're failing to realize is that it's a lot of times it's just the trauma of our lived experiences, because we are literally not in control of our bodies. And I literally, on the way here, I just was almost pulled over. And I say almost because somebody ran the red light and the officer went after them. I guess my infraction would not have been that great. But I remember being at the light and seeing the officer make that U-turn to get behind you. And I felt the tension. And I felt like, what happens if I get pulled over? What happens if I get arrested? What happens if something detrimental or even worse happens? On the day that I found out about Breonna Taylor and the, well, let's not even get into that right now because I've cried enough. But I felt this heaviness. And I sat there in my car thinking, what did I do? Did I fail to yield? Like going through this over and over until someone ran a red light and then the officer went after them. And then I was like happy, but it's also like, what are they going to do to them? You know? And I still feel this like tension now, even though that happened an hour and 41 minutes ago. And so I don't want us to negate what you said earlier, Nakia, talking about trauma, because the trauma that we experience every day, week, every month is building within us and physically affecting us mentally, emotionally, and spiritually as well.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, because what you were just describing at the beginning, where you're like, I don't have any control of my body anymore. Like, that's dissociation, right? Like, my body is here, but I am gone. Like, I am so gone, right? Like, it's like something is coming in and is replaced, replace me. I'm trying to go somewhere safe. And like, there is something that is like, okay, threat, danger, like, we got to figure out what's going on, right? And then like, when you were talking about going through, like, did I fail to yield? Did I do this? Did I do that? And I'm just thinking about the fact that, like, he pulled up behind you. If you had done something, he'd have just stayed there, right? Like, he went after this other person, but it doesn't matter. You could have done all of those things. You could have done nothing, right? Like the article that I linked in there, the woman who was at the bridge, all she had was like a cab written on her car. That is why they stopped her. That is why they like put two giant trucks like squishing her car and drones and little like bomb robots out to her cars, because she had a cab on it. It doesn't even have to be anything. There doesn't have to be a reason for them to have done this. This can just be a power situation, right? And then when you're talking about like the health effects, one of the things that like, and racism is such a complex adaptive system, and it gets you on every single point all of the time, right? So we have the dissociation and we have these mental health issues, and then like it gets into our body because our brain and our body are not in fact disconnected and are incredibly close, right? Like that's where we live. And then we have these health outcomes, right? We have those higher diabetes levels, rates, we have that high blood pressure, we have all these things. And then what happens when we have those things is like we are shamed for having the health outcomes from racism, right? Like, oh, well, you know, y'all need to eat some apples. Well, that's because y'all just eat terribly. It's all that fried chicken. You know, you should just have some fruits and vegetables, right? Like all of these things, we are shamed for the responses to that our body is having to racism, as though that this is our fault. Right. So like at every stage, there's this idea that like, it's your fault. It's your fault that you got pulled over. It's your fault that like your health is bad, like all of these different ways to create more tiny traumas on every single level. Right.
And as queer people, we do not have access to systems that will give us resources to deal with this. And so when MsAmazingHead was talking about the way they present, we have a multitude of people who are non-binary, non-conforming, you know, masculine presenting, femme presenting. And if they go into work a 9 to 5, no. Not only because you're Black, but because we don't know how you identify and what's going on with you. So that's a lack of access to insurance, you know. So how do you pay for it even when you get high blood pressure? You know, you got heart pains and chest pains, don't even know how to deal with it, can't go to the doctor because no one wants to hire you. And then the places that we are allowed to work, how do you move up in those institutions, right? Like, how do you have access to make more disposable income? How do you have access to move up within your job? You know, those just don't exist all the time for people who are queer. And so all of this is like really linked together because our identities are not in isolation. You know, they're all linked, and these systems kind of merge to continue to oppress us in ways that sometimes it's hard to figure out, like, was it because I'm Black? Was it because I'm gay? No, it's because you're Black and gay. You know, these systems are not, they don't give a damn about you. It's because you are Black, gay, living your truth, living your life, presenting how you want to present, but the system does not want you to succeed. The system is built for us to continue to be in these boxes. The system is built for us to continue to have all these high rates of all of these illnesses and things that physically impact us. And when we try to get up, you know, and change systems for other people, oh, why are you being so aggressive? Ooh, why are you doing this? Oh, why are you doing that? And to any of you well-intentioned white people here, if you are in a position to amplify the voices of Black queer people, whether it be against police brutality, adverse health outcomes, you need to use your power and your privilege to do so, because there are people who are Black and queer who are trying to do this, but we get all of this pushback, and it's like, girl, I'm just trying to make it. I'm trying to make it better for my community, and I'm trying to go home, get paid, have a nice glass of wine and live, survive to be here for my community.
I do have sorry.
I just want to say something real quick on top of what Joe was saying, where like there's that lack of access, but then like when we do get healthcare, right, like it is lower quality, right? And again, there's a piece in there that's just like, one, being queer and like trying to receive healthcare when your queer is visible, when your queer makes other people uncomfortable, like is an issue in and of itself. And like all of those things where you're like, oh, I have an ear infection, it's probably because you're on hormones, right? Like any of that bullshit, right? But then there's that class interaction there too, right? Because when I used to work at Apple. I'm used to having good, fancy health insurance, y'all. Like, it's a privilege and it's a benefit, and I recognize that. And I wish that everybody else had it. I don't have it anymore, but regardless, there was one time when I was like, you know what? I'm about to get a little hookup. Like, I got a friend coming into town. I want to get my pedigree just checked out really quick so I can just be like, boop. So like we can do some things, right? And so I didn't have health insurance at the time. And so there was a clinic that I went to that was supposed to be like a real cheap clinic, and it's like $20. So I was like, okay, dope. So I go to this clinic, and this is the first time that I've ever gone to a clinic that was like this. And like, they didn't really seem to actually care a whole lot about the people who were there. And I was like, okay, that's whatever. And then I go back to the room, and after they draw my blood, and I talk to the nurse, and she's like, so how many children do you have? And I was like, I don't have any kids. And she was like, I'm sorry, what? And I was like, I don't have any children. And she's like, well, I feel like she asked all these questions that were just like out of pocket. But the thing that I remember the most was that she asked me if I was having sex with gay men. And I was like, no, because I wasn't at the time. And she said at least 7 different times on 7 occasions, that gay men are responsible for HIV. And as long as you're not having sex with gay men, then like you should be safe and you should be okay, because it's those gay men that have HIV. Y'all, this was in like within the last 2 years. Within the last 2 years in Austin, Texas, in like the queer capital of Texas, this white woman nurse is telling me about how gay men have HIV, and like gay men have it 7 times in the same conversation, right? And again, there's that class thing where like you're not just policed and dehumanized and demeaned by like actual police officers, but just every single point in these systems. Even when you have access to the system, even when you're like, okay, I gave you money, you're supposed to be able to provide me with services, you still have this like dehumanizing part where they're talking about, oh, like this is what happens with queer people, right? And so it just blows my mind, because it's not only just not having that access to get there, like, but when you do finally get there, you're like, man, I could have stayed my ass at home. Like I could have just not, So.
Oh, that was great. Greta James posted in the comments a comment about how female, possibly queer officers are often aggressive, confrontational, and asked if anyone has any thoughts on that. I feel like it's very much in the line of some of what we've already been talking about, this intersection with trauma and tension, but yeah.
I can't specifically say a point in my life where I have had that experience. But what I can say in my experience in dealing with the police training video review panel is, I think once you are inside of that specific institution, you are taught to fall in line and bag the badge. And so I think in order to truly change any system within the police, it is going to be very difficult because of the history of that of that idea. And even when you bring up like, okay, we're changing the training videos, but who's going to change the culture? That answer is not there because no one has thought about how it's a cultural problem. It's the system that is an issue, and it's the people within the system. So if someone identifies as, you know, Black, queer, trans, non-binary, and they're a police officer, I'm not surprised if they cannot change the culture which was built to oppress them, even though they're in the system. And they're taught to just literally fall in line and do as they are told, based on my experiences talking to the officers in this panel. And I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about this yet, but we here and it's already out there. But that would not surprise me per se. And I often think about, it's not only that specific institution where that happens. That happens in a lot of jobs where you cannot say anything because of your identity. And part of that, I feel, is a necessary form for survival. But the issue I have here is you are part of this system and inflicting more harm on the community, not just by being in the system, but by being complicit in this system as well. Is that the word, complicit? Implicit? Y'all know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
MsAmazingHead, do you have some thoughts? I feel like we haven't heard from you in a minute. Oh, you're on mute, MsAmazingHead.
Switched positions.
You still on mute.
I'm so sorry. I'm on this Benadryl. Please forgive me. I've just been all ears, just listening to everything, just taking it in.
Okay.
But yeah, just forgive me. I'm just all ears. I'm just gonna be quiet.
I feel like Miss Greta James Maxfield had actually answered her own question, talking about internalized white supremacists and normative views that they impose on the public. And I feel like that's so true. And often in spaces, you have to overcompensate, right? So like one of the manifestations of internalized racial oppression, specifically inferiority, is overcompensation, right? So like if you are a Black person and you're not queer and you're wearing the badge, like you can be a Black cis male and wearing that badge, and you have to overcompensate. You have to be more racist than the racist white people to show to have that belonging and to like prove over and over and over again that you deserve to be there, right? And that's the same for like when you are female and you show up and you are in the academy, like you have to overcompensate. And part of that is like trauma that you're having from being in a place that does not serve you, that does not see you as fully human and does not want you to be there, right? And so again, every single day you have to prove that this is where you're supposed to be. And the problem is that culture piece, and the way to prove that you're a good police officer is to brutalize the public, right? If like proving like good police officerness was like something that was nice and like, oh yeah, you know, like you just got to be really respectful, and that's how you can be like the best police officer. That's how you can make sure that we care about what you're doing. Accept you as one of our own. Like if that was the culture, then like people would be out nicing each other, and wouldn't that be fucking amazing? But instead, the culture of the police department, like keeping that status quo and making sure that Black and brown people know their place, and like making those arrests and making sure that like we are brutalizing the public in a certain way so that they comply and they stay in line, right? And so I think that there's a lot of intersections and trauma there, but there is a lot of internalized racial oppression and that overcompensation, so that if they want to be able to stay there and be a part of that police department, they have to do some certain things. Oh.
We got some knocking.
Reforms are, yeah. That's why we're not trying to reform it. We're trying to abolish this. Like,
I wanted to ask all the panelists is thinking a little bit more in terms of some practical steps and guidance. If these different establishments, whether it's a club or a restaurant or even group spaces, want to create spaces and want to make it clear that those spaces are safe for trans and queer people and gender non-conforming folks. What are some, and not relying on police officers or the kind of conventional sort of violent authority figure, what are some ways that they can signal that those spaces are safe and make those spaces safer for queer and trans people? If there's any ideas?
Just to clarify,
Yeah.
you mean safe? What do you mean by safe? I have an interpretation, but I want to make sure I'm answering what you're asking.
Yeah, and I think safety is itself this concept that needs to be unpacked, right? But I mean safe in the sense that you would feel comfortable in that space and that you wouldn't feel like you're, the experience you described of like losing a sense of control over your own body, that you would be in a space where that would not be at risk of happening, but also your own identity and perspective would actually be heard and listened to. So probably some mixture of different kinds of safety. So I know it's broad. It's kind of intentionally broad.
I'm the same.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Nakia.
Okay. I
I have
can't
a lot to say, so I'll go last.
So I feel like doing the consulting work that I do, there's a lot of times that people are like, oh, well, what can we do to make Black people more welcome? And it's like, you can transform your entire systems to like stop centering white people and like acknowledge on a very base level that there are other people who are here, right? And these systems don't have a problem with like making white, rich, queer boys feel really welcome, right? Like y'all don't have a problem. Y'all ain't out here being like, how can we make you feel welcome? Because you already have, like, y'all know how to do that, right? Like, because you center them all the time. Center somebody else, like center us. That's how you can do that. Like, what is it? Y'all know, like, with the music that appeals to them, the aesthetic that appeals to them. Y'all do research on that shit. Y'all have like panels and like, what are those things called when they ask you questions? Those little groups. Y'all. What? Yes, focus groups. Yes. Like you have all of these things. You have information that's written about like white folks, by white folks, about white folks, right? Like find other people. Like where are you getting your information from? Like do your own work to be able to do that. And like it really makes me so angry when like they're like, oh well, like just tell us what to do. Like just give us. So do we put like a rainbow up? Just a rainbow flag? Is that cool? Is that the thing that we need to do? Do we need to say like Black Lives Matter? And that shit makes me mad right now because Black Lives Matter is so fucking trendy that like you see Black Lives Matter and those people are still using racial epithets to describe people of color because like they're not actually interested in the movement or have any sort of idea with it. So like not having these like little false decisions, but like literally change your power structure and who you're censoring if you want to do that. That's my answer.
I think give resources so Black queer people can create space for Black queer people. I don't trust now after having gone through this summer, I do not trust certain institutions to be able to create space for Black people, Black queer people. I say that because when all of this happened, when the movement kind of swelled and Pride Month had just started, we heard this from the bars and nightclubs. Silence for 6 days. And it wasn't until I mentioned it to my roommate, who's white, who then called out the bars, and then they responded and was like, Oh yeah, Black Lives Matter. Girl, Stonewall was started by Black and brown folks. And it is a severe disappointment that you continually negate our history within this overall movement. So, do I trust you to be able to create a space for us when you always ignore us? No. And then what I don't want to happen is, okay, we're going to partner with these organizations and recreate another Black Night, because that's all that's going to happen. Oh, this is going to be our hip hop night. This is going to be the night we do a ball. Okay, but the rest of the nights is still the same. And I just, at this point, I don't want that. So if we need to create a space, you know, maybe we don't have the capital to buy a building and have a club. Cool. There are plenty of parks. We're gonna find an old abandoned warehouse, you know, BYOB or something. But I just don't trust institutions to be able to provide a safe space for us when you had an opportunity to truly be like, hey, this is happening, especially during Pride Month. You know, no BS aside, but we're going to talk about this. We're going to come up with some things because we keep hearing the community say this space is not safe. And when you have the opportunity to step up to the mic, when you have the opportunity to be Beyonce in this situation, if you want to call it that, you chose just to take your happy ass to the back and continue to be silent. Cool. Say less.
MsAmazingHead, do you have any thoughts on that? I'd love to hear.
Oh, I totally agree with Joe with creating our spaces for us. That's why I came and formed up the Austin Queer Cultural Center. That will be for the urban LGBT of all color. You know, we should have a place where we feel wanted and respected 24/7, 365 days a year. And that's when I went back onto saying, hey, if we put our money into these businesses, that's only going to give us one night to celebrate us, when we all and everyone should be celebrated just as much as equal 365 days a year. So most likely it's really great that we team up and we change that narrative and change history, take back our culture, and as a whole race, not just Black, not just Latino, Filipino, white, Indian, Asian, all queer. Put them all together. It's just about like a little Noah's Ark, a center for all different shapes and colors of queer people, you know, and so therefore we can be in unity again. And this is the start of something great. And Joe was onto something there.
And, you know, following up and to Joe's question and to what you just said, what are some of the sort of specific resources and sort of priorities of what you guys are looking for at the Austin Queer Cultural Center? And if people want to help mobilize around things, I'm definitely hearing a need for finding physical space that can be where you know, events, gatherings, meetings, all kinds of things can happen. What are some other needs? And also putting out a call for that space. But yeah.
Most definitely. I remember this past Saturday I was speaking and I heard one of the speakers is saying like hire more Black people in establishments. And I challenged everyone to hire more Black queer, not just only Black queer, hire more queer in these establishments. I very dislike how one person just like uses this one person as their staple to hold all this and say, hey, this is a symbolization of what this is. No, we come in all different forms and shapes and sizes, have different opinions, and we all come from different walks and natures of life. And so I strongly feel that, you know, to see these people out there, you know, like, such as myself, I need to be represented because there's more people like myself that's not being represented. And so it takes all of us as a community to represent and support each other. And yeah, I'm sorry.
I think what MsAmazingHead said is correct, to not hire more of our community in positions of authority, and let me not say authority, positions where they can make institutional changes is a long way of saying that. But what are some of the more pressing needs? If we're talking about just a survival, it is access to some sort of income, it's access to housing, access to healthcare. Those are like the things that are just like, okay, we need this to survive and live. But even in institutions, and I see some people in the chat talking about this, even in spaces where it is safe for Black people, we need our allies to stand up and speak up when they hear transphobia or homophobia or all of these things. Like, we need you to stand up for us, because we're in that position where it's like, damn, if I say something, I could be attacked. You know, if I don't say something, damn, I didn't say nothing. You know, we need you to speak openly and publicly and be like, chill out with that. We're not doing that in this establishment, whether that's a nail salon, a barbershop, or wherever it can be. Because I have barbershops that I go to. I can wear a face full of makeup in there and get my little high top fade, whatever I want to do. And I have no issues with anybody, the barbers or the clients. But not everyone has that privilege to go to these spaces, you know, and be whomever they are and get a haircut and stuff like that. And that's simple stuff, you know? And so when we're talking about creating spaces, think of some of the places that we go to, you know, and I don't want to say any businesses because I don't want people to think I'm saying they're homophobic or anything, but thinking about some of these cultural institutions, we need to make sure that they're safe for us. And when I say safe, I'm not going to walk into the establishment and hear somebody say faggot. I'm not going to walk into the establishment and hear somebody talk about trans women or not women. I'm not going to walk into the establishment and hear some fuck shit, because I want to enjoy that establishment as a Black person sometimes, right? And I also want to ensure that everyone in my community feels safe, you know, in that space. And so that's what I mean by safe. And a lot of times you'll get somebody will say something and everyone gets quiet and they look at you and then you leave and then they'll be like, I'm sorry that happened to you, silently. No, I need you to call it out as soon as it happened. I don't know these people. These are your people, right? So I need you to say something right then and right there, because what we continue to do is put all of the burden on Black queer people, and we are tired. Black trans women have, you know, a life expectancy shorter than a lot of us. We shouldn't put more work on them to talk about their experiences. I need to be talking about that, right? I need to be checking folks. And so we should not, if we have a position of privilege, we should be the ones who are continuing to check folks as soon as they say some fuck shit. It should not be the person who has to deal with that lived experience on a daily basis, because that is more trauma on them. That is more that they're having to take on. That's a heavier burden. And I'm tired of having to do that, not only for me, but I'm tired of having to see that happen to people, right? I have a Black trans friend. If I see somebody look at her wrong, I'm calling that shit out. Because you're not gonna do that in front of me. Now you can do that in front of your goddamn mama, but not Joe, not Jeaux, not today, not tomorrow, not next week.
So good, so good.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe. That's what's up. We need that. Yes.
Yeah, I got you. I got shit. Not today. No, ma'am.
Not today.
Yeah.
Needed that. It most definitely jobs for us. You know, I applied with the city 3 times. I have certifications. I have a high school diploma. I have all the things. And this is before the Black Lives Movement. I was told that I couldn't get a position because I wasn't bilingual with the city. And I don't want to say their names, I'm gonna call them out, but you know, not too many places where I can fit in with and work for the city that's reachable for my kind, my type of people, the queer people. So that's in the sex education work field. But I was told that I couldn't get a job because I was bilingual. And I felt like it's because I'm Black. This was before the Black Lives Matter movement, and I would like to apply for those same positions to see the narrative change and, you know, just create jobs for us. For me, I have to live, you know. a lot of trans women, they work as sex workers. And now with this whole pandemic, it's not safe. It's not safe, first of all, because of Corona. It's not safe because you don't know who this person coming over your house. You're giving up your address. You're giving up your home. You're inviting a stranger into your house. How would you feel? Literally. Wow. You know, so we have to, I take it upon myself to speak up and fight for the next generation to come. That some people who don't have, you know, everything set out for them are just always being told, no, you're not good enough. No, you're not passable. No, you can't do this, or maybe try something else, you know. So I'm here to stand against that and shatter that. So it takes a village. And I've been in this by myself, and now I feel like I'm being actually heard, and that my life is valid. Because the life expectancy for Black trans women and trans women are very short. They said 35. I'll be 34 December 1st. Thank God I made it this far. And so a lot of trauma comes with that, just knowing that. And then I realized, take this off, I become him. What's the life expectancy for a Black man now, you know? So it's just like, wow, how do I get to work and how do I get to fit this in and be whole and protected? But it's up to us to build our community now. So now that we know that here, that energy is not welcome, that you don't have to worry about that. I lived out in Los Angeles, and my phone had broke, and I was walking around. I couldn't Uber or anything because my phone was broke. It was shattered. Try going to a place and don't have your phone, which has your maps on it. You know how to get around. I walked around. There was police officers there. I was asking them for help. Unfortunately, being a Black trans woman, that's, you know, you get mistaken. I get mistaken as a streetwalker at night. If I'm just walking to the corner store or walking to check the mailbox, those things can happen. So I'm asking the police officers out there, can you guys help me? Out of this, out of that. I'm like, whatever, you're a prostitute. Didn't get any help. I kept walking and I came across the LGBTQ Community Center of Los Angeles. And it was 4:00 in the morning by then. And I walked in and I was like, oh my God, you guys are open? It was just really an eye-opener and a breath of fresh air, because being from Austin, we still don't have nothing like that here. You know, if it wasn't for that center, I wouldn't be here alive. Those people I wouldn't have those people ordered me a cab home and pay for it. 4:00 in the morning. Right off this Sunset Boulevard. Stars of Sunset Boulevard. And I got home and I realized there was that back home here in Austin that there was nothing. I found myself sleeping at a bus stop. In my old neighborhood, which I knew that I was safe, but things have changed now in the last 2 years. So I took it upon myself to create Austin Queer Cultural Center. And this center, we would teach job readiness skills, GED. I would like to employ other queer people, minority people as well. I would like to build, and with this Austin Queer Culture Center, it would be a theater, outside theater, so therefore we can be entertained with drag shows, we can entertain ourselves, we'll have a museum of all the icons, legendary queer folks here in Austin, Texas that have shifted and changed the city, such as Leslie. She should be uplifted. Just a lot that I have vision for Austin Queer Cultural Center, and just creating a space and a place for us. And with this Queer Cultural Center, I want to do GED. I want to get people ready for work. And also I would like to have shelter at least for 20 to 40 people. That's the minimum. And I know that this will grow, but just for 20 to 40 queer, trans, non-binary, whoever, because homeless is very big here in Austin. And I lived in homeless shelters in California, and this is about 2-3 years ago, and they put me on the men's floor. And I find it funny, and I'm laughing because I made it through that, because only a strong one could survive. They put you in a homeless shelter on the men's floor. What do you think is going to happen at night? You know, thank God I had a locked door, you know, but I got the knocks all night. But I want to provide something much better for Austin and Austinites and the people of the city of Austin that comes to the city. So I've learned that what all I have been through have prepared me for what I'm going through now for today's world. So I'm just going to apply it and mingle and network amongst my people here in Austin, Texas, and shape the future for this city, especially for all queer of color people.
That's a beautiful vision.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I feel like you brought in so much with that, where and I think that one of the things that happens when we have that trauma that Joe was talking about, that day in, day out, trauma all the time, is that things like our death and its imminence is kind of like it's almost a thing that we get inured to, like we kind of dissociate from that, right? You were like, oh yeah, like I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for these people who were able to be open at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's huge, right? Like that's a huge deal, right? The idea that the life expectancy is 35 years old for Black trans folks, right? Like that's not a small thing. Like that's huge. That's your whole life, right? And like knowing that, and that's trauma in and of itself, right? And like it's something that we can't get away from. And so like we kind of joke about it and we're like, oh yeah, you know, that thing. And it's not a big deal because we can't think about it. Because if we actually really think about it, then like we can't function that day, right? Like we're not gonna function all week. Like if that's a huge thing that's right there. And I feel like it's really important to like sit with that for a minute, right? Like there's very few groups, there's very few demographics out here where 35 is their life expectancy, right? Especially here in Austin, right? And then I wanted to touch on the fact that you brought in homelessness, right? And like that intersection, if we're talking about queerness and Blackness and policing, homelessness is like right there, right? How many people who are homeless in Austin who are experiencing not having a house, a place to stay at, are folks who are queer, right? Like this is not a small population, right? And like how is it that the intersection of all of those things just compound so hard when dealing with police officers, when dealing with the criminal justice system, right? So those are the things that like really come out for me, and it's really strong. But then I wanted to ask y'all a question, because there's a couple of things that y'all said, be like, oh, you know, safety looks like this doesn't look like safety. Like safety looks like not having to deal with racial epithets, or like this is the vision that I wanted to have for the Austin Queer Culture Center, because like this is what I wanted to see. And I wanted to ask y'all and kind of end on the idea of like, what does liberation look like? What does Black queer liberation look like? And not like what it doesn't look like, right? Because a lot of times we're just like, we want to make things less worse than they are right now. I don't want to have to deal with police in my neighborhood. That's not what I'm asking. I'm not asking what it doesn't look like. I'm asking what it does look like. What does it smell like? What does Black queer liberation taste like? What does Black queer liberation sound like? Like what is that? What is the vision that you have about Black queer liberation in Austin? Do we even have one, right? And like, what does that look like?
You know, last year on Labor Day weekend, I don't know the date, I forgot, but it was Labor Day weekend. Well, let me go back. Austin Pride weekend, my friend Eric was like, we got to get the girls together and go out how we used to, you know, just go out with us and just have a good time. Like we ain't been out in a long time. And I was like, yeah, we do. And so we decided Labor Day weekend to do this. We sent a random text and slid in a whole bunch of DMs and was like, meet us here at 4 for Sunday Fun Day, right? We ended up just going downtown, and that has been the best night I have ever had in Austin. At one point, it had to be like 25 of us in a bar. I won't say, who was doing what, I keep some secrets, but it was just full of love. It was full of support. People was talking about their projects. People was dancing. People was having a good time. The music was good. The drinks was flowing. And that was a magical night. And so when you say like, what does liberation look like? To me, it is that. I felt like I was wrapped up in not only the arms of the community, but I feel like we were all covered by the ancestors. I felt like they were proud of beautiful Black people who identified as queer, a rainbow of mahogany, just enjoying life, enjoying being. And I do not know what time everybody got home, but we all made it safely. And that's to me what it feels like. That's to me what it smells like, cocoa butter, and melanin. And I don't know, I feel like we know what that smells like, but I feel like we don't know, but that's what it smelled like that night. I feel like it tasted like heaven. And I feel like I have not been in a space where we took over a space and it was just us. Because it was, it wasn't nobody else in that space. It was just us thriving. And that's what it would feel like. And until we get the thing set up to be able to just be, and to just feel and to just laugh and to just love, I don't know if I'll get back to that space, but I want to. And I feel like it's right in front of me. I feel like I'm chasing it. What did Viola say when she won the Oscar? I feel like there's a line. She did that Harriet Tubman quote, I want to say, and I see all of these amazing folks over there, and I just don't know how to get there. And I feel like with that experience, I can see it. I can literally see in my mind us, and I can see us just enjoying life, but I don't know how to get back to that place. And I want to, because I need to, and I feel like we all need to. But that's what liberation feels like. And there were just no words. It was just a vibe. And if you know what a vibe is, or if you've been a part of a vibe where everything is good, that's how I felt. I almost felt like we was in the middle of the club and somebody could have brought out a spades table, and that would have just been the cherry on top. Like that would have been like, yeah. I felt like it felt like a family reunion, But not everyone knew each other. It was people kept texting people. They texted their friends, and it was super dope.
Love that. Thank you so much. It's like palpable. It's just so good. That rainbow of mahogany. Thank you.
Yes. To chime in, I'll be 34 in December. I've been going out in the nightlife scene in Austin since the early 2000s. And I'm the self-proclaimed queen of ATX. Reason because the queen of Austin is Leslie. If we all don't know who Leslie is, Google Leslie. I met Leslie when I was 14 years old, sneaking in the club sound downtown. And I took heed unto who she was and how people gravitated to her and coined her the queen of Austin. And when Leslie passed away, I made it my duty to carry on her legacy. I have paved a way in places and spaces here in Austin that wasn't welcoming to a Black trans woman like myself. And I have done a lot of pioneering, I say, on 6th Street in the heterosexual division district. I'm really known in the hetero world in a good way, but it has not always been that good for me. And before the pandemic, to reference to Joe, I went downtown. I was so used to me being on 6th Street, the only one like myself. So everyone will always run up to me, can I get a picture with you? Can I get a picture with you? Can I get a picture with you? Yes. But post to the pandemic, I started noticing it's a whole cluster of queer on 6th Street. It felt good. It felt good. I was like, finally. I remember back years, I was like, I would be the only one down here. And the people always embraced me with love. But then again, you had your bad apples in a bunch. And it felt so good being back home and seeing that here in Austin, that the queers and the gays are not just placed in the warehouse district and the gay district. They can roam through this beautiful city because we own this city as well. But it felt really, really good seeing that. I think last time I've been out, I've seen like over 60 queer people on 6th Street in one night. I felt good just seeing that. But we most definitely, it just shows the importance to myself that we most definitely need a space and a place, not just only for nightlife, for life, for 360 every day, 24/7, a place and space for us to uplift and unite and amplify ourselves. But other than just seeing each other out on 6th Street, it felt good, like, oh, hey, you know. But due to this whole post-COVID-19 stuff, we'll see how everything shifts, though. But back to Joe, you changing it. You're changing that narrative. It's like, how do you get back to that place? We tunnel our way into a new one. We start rebuilding. And so therefore what we build and what you build would be better, would be just a custody for you and for all, how you shift the world now, in your view, how we mold that. But yes, excuse me. But yeah, creating spaces for us. Woo.
I feel like,
Yeah.
Are you complete? Did you want to add something? I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
I mean, no, I'm done. Thank you.
I feel like my version of Black queer liberation has a lot of there's a lot of greenery. There's a lot of being able to be in relationship with ourselves and each other in a way that is like natural and appreciative. I feel like my view of queer Black liberation looks a whole lot like self-care, not in like the party, the club times, but in the down times, right? Like in the, this is Sunday afternoon and we're gonna come to the backyard and we're gonna have a sound bath time, right? Like this is
Yes.
everybody's gonna show up and like we're gonna have a rainbow of mahogany. We also gonna have a spectrum of gender. Like we're gonna be gender queer, we're gonna be gender fucked, we're gonna be all of the things. We're gonna be non-binary, like we're gonna be all the things, right? And it includes like an embracing of like our bodies, right? In a very specific way. I think that like a lot of times when we think about queerness, it always has to do with like bodies and sex. And like there's a rigid way in which we show up and can show up, right? And I feel like I want to be able to have that relaxed feeling about this where all bodies are welcome and like we're able to just lean into that. And it's a softness and it's a regular exploration of what gender means. Like, what does it mean to be male? Like, what does it mean to be female? Like, what does that mean? What does it mean to be a man? Right. And like understanding that this is not having anything to do with like specific genitalia or like anything that's like hard and definite, but it's soft and it's like this, it's not even a gray space, it's like a lavender space, right? And it's a place for us to be able to be soft with each other, and have grace with each other, and for us to really, really be so grateful and thankful and show so much appreciation to our older queer folks who made it through, because there were so few of us who did, right? And it's a real deepening of our understanding of like what Black liberation has looked like before, and like our understanding of Black liberation and connections and movements. It is a culture of accountability that's like that's an accountability with love, and a place where we don't throw people away, right? But where that justice is palpable in those little tiny things, where it's like a consensus space where we're all bringing each other along, because we know that we need every single one of us. Sorry, I'm getting all like, there's all the things. Kind of, I feel like this is what Joe looked like when you were talking about Joe shit. You were like, yes, all the things. But yeah, that is what Black queer liberation looks and feels like. It does feel like coconut butter, cocoa butter. It also feels like coconut oil and like little tinctures and shit, right? That we made with the plants in the backyard. And it tastes like collard greens, again, that we picked from the backyard. And it smells like fresh tomatoes, right? My goodness, it feels like your hair on a fluffy day, right? When sometimes you feel it and it's like, oh, this feels like pillow stuffing. And it also feels like your hair after you conditioned it, and it's just like silky, right? And it looks like sun-kissed skin, right? It looks like skin in the sun, and it looks like moonlit silhouettes dancing. I'm sorry, I got a whole thing. Anyway, so that's what my Black queer liberation looks like. And some mac and cheese. You're right. JP, do you have an idea of what? Actually, I don't even know. Like, do you identify as queer? Are you a straight person in this conversation?
I am a queer person in the world.
Oh, hey.
Tell me what your queer liberation looks like. Tell us what it looks like.
I think for me, the concept of liberation, at least at this moment, it really looks and feels like a whole new relationship to time, a different concept of time. Even, we're talking about the difficulty of listening and the way people don't listen often to the experiences of queer and trans people. And I think a significant barrier to us really listening and hearing what the other has to say is being able to take a deep breath and slow down and calm down. And I think we're all very caught up in this productivity culture where we're all chasing the things that we're trying to have. And so for me, it's a new way of being that is about being and not about having. It's not about what your identity, your value in the world is not about what you own, but about who you are. And I think that's what liberation is for me. It's like a new relationship to time and a new relationship to being, so that I can slow down, so that we can all slow down, so that we can breathe, so that we can listen to each other, so that we can snuggle, so that we can sleep, so that we can roll around and laugh and all of that. And it's not about sort of this endless pursuit of productivity and deadlines. And also so that we can learn more about each other. It's all this learning that we get to do when we take time to actually learn. So that's what I like.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you for coming with us on this journey, for sharing your and your perspectives and your snaps, your truth. And your view of liberation, right? Like, I feel like that's one of the things that's so important, because this isn't just like, what aren't we doing anymore, right? This is reimagining, and like, how are we using our imagination to have these really concrete visions of what our future can look like, not just like a little less worse, but just like amazing and beautiful and bountiful and like human, right? So I want to say thank you all for joining us on this panel today, and we really appreciate it, and you coming in with your words and taking your time with us. Did y'all want to say any closing out thoughts at all?
I know a lot of people are asking about Austin Queer Cultural Center. There is an Instagram page and Facebook. It is Austin Queer Cultural Center. You guys can follow. And I know someone reached out about donating. I will be setting up a GoFundMe by the end of the year for Austin Queer Cultural Center. But to keep in contact with us, make sure you follow on Instagram. And thank you all for your support. And it's a pleasure meeting you. And I met Joe before and JP.
Nothing other than rest you know, if we need to. Lean into our friends and our family if we need to. A lot is going on. Like all of this shit is going on, and we still in the pandemic. Like, like there is so much going on. So, you know, really take care of our bodies and nourish our souls, because the fight will continue. And when we can't continue for a brief moment, it's okay to sit. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to disconnect, because we have to, you know, we have to take care of ourselves in order to continue this journey. You know, if anybody wants to follow me, I am No Joking Around on Twitter. That's No Joe King Around. And then on IG, I'm Fresh Cup of Joe, Joe. Just because someone already took the one with JEAUX, so I couldn't take that one. But yeah, and just I do a lot of work. If you want to follow me, dope. I like to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. And if yeah, I think I'm pretty funny and passionate.
GP, do you have closing thoughts?
Just want to thank you all so much for joining us, and look forward to seeing the Queer Cultural Center become a reality. And it's an honor to be here with y'all as always.
And if you want to share this, this was recorded the whole time. So if there was somebody who you wanted to share this with and they weren't able to make it, it'll be on the AJC event page. So you'll be able to hear that.
Yeah, this will live on YouTube, so you can find the link and share it.
Awesome. Thank y'all.
Thank y'all, everybody.
Love you all. See you soon.
Good.
You gotta stay good. You gotta stay good.
Bye.
Good job.